Appreciate that. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Great to see you all here this evening. And I'm curious, has anyone here used Agile or the Scrum framework? Comment in the chat. If you have, how long? Any months, years, weeks? Have you heard it before? Have you heard people talk about it? Or just is this your first exposure in this session here? So comment in the chat. Would love to hear what your experience has been with any exposure to Agile or the Scrum framework. So give just a moment for that. So we've got 2 months, a few months of tinkering, heard it in class, about a couple months, heard about it from a friend. Okay, so it sounds like pretty fresh experience here. The good news there is that you haven't learned how to do it the wrong way. Congratulations. We'll be talking about the benefits of Agile and the Scrum framework and how it can be really, really essential for a project to be completed successfully. Okay, so project using Agile, but could be more on top of it. Yeah, there's a lot of organizations that do a hybrid approach, and that's not ideal because I've never heard someone say, I kind of sort of did Scrum and it was amazing. Like usually people that do a hybrid don't necessarily get an amazing result, because what happens is that when someone's not using the approach properly, they'll do part of it and they'll pick and choose the stuff that's difficult or that requires some change in the organization. Those are things they don't do. But in fact, that's exactly where they should be focusing to remove that as a roadblock. So if it takes an organization 3 weeks to get anything done in their approval process, instead of saying we can't deliver in a 2-week sprint, why don't you fix the approval process? Why do you need so many people involved in that? Why does it take almost a month to get anything approved? So we really look at, when you're applying the Scrum framework, it's the most commonly used Agile approach, like can we do that properly so that we can ensure we get the best results? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and walk through some slides. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We'll be happy to answer those either as we go, or I might not see them till a bit later, but we'll loop back around for that. So today we want to talk about Scrum certification and the benefits of Agile leadership. So Scrum is the most commonly used Agile approach. About 56% of companies that use Agile are using the Scrum framework. It's fairly straightforward, and it's been known to help people. The tagline for Scrum is to do twice the work in half the time. Now, anytime I mention it that way and describe it like that, everyone says, oh, I want that. I want to be able to do twice the work in half the time. And well, yeah, wouldn't we all? So the concept of Agile can be applied in a variety of different ways to pretty much any type of project. And I've been experimenting with Agile outside of IT because it's used a lot in software development because it works really well for large, complex projects. And so we've been applying it with marketing and even the concept of personal agility, to apply Agile in your life to do more of what really matters and achieve your goals. It works really, really well. So I want to start off by doing a little bit of a comparison and a contrast from a traditional project management approach to using an Agile approach. And there's an article in Forbes that I thought really described this well with this visual. So if we look at our degree of business success over time, right now, today, we have today's view of an opportunity. And we think, well, here's what's at stake. Here's what we can achieve. Now, that could be possible using the traditional waterfall project management approach, that we could achieve that goal. But it's kind of difficult to plan out a project a year in advance, and things might change along the way. And so how are we going to be effective if something changes in the marketplace? We want to be more flexible than having a rigid planning approach where we plan out the next year and we try to stick to that plan and expect nothing to be dynamic or different. I think a lot of us have seen over the last year, anything could change at any time in this world. And so it's really an opportunity for people to apply Agile now more than ever before. If we're using an Agile approach, we're going to work in shorter iterations. So we're going to look at, okay, there's a shorter stretch of time. We're going to do the work, then we're going to inspect and adapt. Then we're going to do more work, inspect and adapt, and then we're going to iterate through. Similar to like a lean startup concept of the pivot. We're going to make adjustments as we go. Now, as you're hearing me talk about this, you might be thinking, well, that makes a lot of sense. And it really does, especially when you're in a dynamic environment, when the work is very complex. Agile also helps us to break the work down to be more manageable. So when we're using an Agile approach, we can actually look at where will the opportunity actually be tomorrow, and we're going to be adjusting our plan as we go to be as accurate as possible. So there's multiple different types of Agile approaches. So I want to start off by giving you an overview of some of the differences. Scrum is the most commonly used Agile framework. It's actually a rugby term. So my understanding of rugby is when they go to put the ball in play, You have both teams huddled up and they're huddled around the ball. They're pushing against each other, arms locked to try to get possession of the ball. Then they pass backward in order to move forward and score. So that symbolizes this iterative nature of the work. And it's also a very collaborative approach with the teammates. Now, Kanban is another approach that is very popular with Agile. And this is one of the biggest differences, that Kanban has no time box. With Scrum, you're going to plan within a time box. So with a Scrum project, you're going to say anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks, what do I think I can get done in this time frame? So whatever duration of time you pick for that time box, you want to stay consistent. So if it's a 2-week sprint, we call the iteration a sprint, you're going to plan out what can I do in the next 2 weeks to have something done, a minimal increment, fully developed, tested, and ready to launch either to market or to showcase just to our stakeholders, whether that's the end customer or even an internal business stakeholder. And so you might already be imagining how effective this could be as a work approach, because instead of planning the whole project up front and having one big release at the end, we have an opportunity to get feedback from our stakeholders every couple of weeks to make sure we're on the right track. So the biggest difference between Scrum and Kanban is that Scrum has a time box and Kanban does not. Scrum is a time box based approach and Kanban is a flow based approach. So we're looking at the continuous flow of value. We want to visualize and track the work in a task board, visualize to do and progress done, and make the work big and visible. And we might even track cycle time. How long does it take us from when we get a request for a requirement to when we start working on it? And then how long does it take us from when we start working on it to it's completed? And so as we're looking at optimizing our throughput and the flow of how we work, we might do some things like limit the work in progress and say, hey, we're only going to have 3 items in progress at any time, because if we get stuck, we're actually going to focus on removing the roadblock rather than just jumping onto a new piece of work. And so this is how teams are more effective and efficient while using an Agile approach. The work is highly visible. We're having these shorter increments that we're working in, and we're able to really focus on what's in our way from moving forward. Now, extreme programming is another Agile approach. We call that XP. And this is using engineering practices, test-driven development, things like continuous integration, pair programming, refactoring. So again, Agile has a lot of background in software development. So there are a lot of teams that are using these technical practices to work more efficiently and effectively. We'll actually explore an example here in just a moment of how Agile is being applied in so many different ways, even outside of IT, outside of just the normal types of projects you might hear, into manufacturing, and how you can actually leverage some of the benefits of these different Agile approaches in order to get some incredible results. Now, when we look at lean, this is something that's often used in manufacturing. It's looking at streamlining the efficiencies, reducing defects. You might have heard of 6 Sigma. So it's all about improving quality and reducing defects and having a better output. And so you might notice there's a commonality across all these different Agile approaches. It's really about efficiency. It's about getting something to market. And whichever Agile approach that you use, I have, in my personal experience, felt like this is way more effective than trying to use a traditional project management approach where you plan everything up front and then you hope you have the right product at the end. So I want to start by telling a story about one of the most simple Agile projects I've ever worked on. And I want to tell this story because I want to illustrate how this is not overly complicated. You do not need to have a bunch of extensive training or years of experience to lead an Agile project. Agile's a mindset. We'll talk about some of the attributes of Agile in just a moment, but it's really about, can we get the minimal increment out to market and get real feedback and then start to inspect and adapt and improve as we go? So I happened to be in my hometown several years ago, and I was at a coffee shop and I ran into a friend that I'd known in high school. His name was James. I was like, hey, how's it going? How have you been? We started catching up. I sat down. I had a nice cup of tea. And we're sitting there chatting, and he asked me, he's like, Maria, I always see you on social media. You're always speaking in front of people. I'm so curious, what is it that you're speaking about? I was like, oh, it's probably Agile. If you see me talking to people, it's probably talking about Agile. That's what I do consulting on. And he said, okay, well, what is Agile? And I explained it the most basic way possible. I was like, well, it's this collaborative work approach where you focus on getting a minimal increment to market, and then you inspect and adapt and iterate to improve the product and improve how you work as a team, and then you build upon it. So there's these short feedback loops that help you increase the quality of your product as you go. So he pulled out this photo of a poem written on a coffee cup, and he said, "Can you Agile this?" I looked at it. I was like, all right, you're going to have to give me a little more backstory here, possibly, but what's going on? Now, James would write these beautiful poems. And if you've read this poem here on screen, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And one day, he was sitting in the coffee shop and he had an idea for a poem. He had a pen, but he had nothing to write on, not even a napkin, no paper. And he didn't want to lose the idea as he was thinking about this beautiful poem. So he grabbed the closest thing to him, which was the coffee cup, and he wrote the poem on the cup. And he looked at it and he said, well, that looks kind of cool. And so the next day he had a pen, he's sitting in the coffee shop, and he wrote a poem on another coffee cup. And he's like, Maria, now I have like 70 coffee cups at home with poems written on them, and I don't know what to do with them, but I feel like there's something here. Can you apply Agile to this? I was like, all right, James, do you have any budget? Let's see what we can do. So we built a website within 1 week, writingoncoffee.com. And you could go to the website, you could scroll through it, and you could then mix and match different poems written on coffee cups and have them printed on a variety of different items. So when you went to the store, you could pick out, something that felt meaningful as a poem, get this as a gift. That person you never know what to buy for. Many of us know coffee lovers. So it's more thoughtful than a gift card, and it's more personalized than just like a card that had something that was written in it. So on the website, you could mix and match any of the poems written on coffee cups, have it printed and framed. We could print it on a pillow, a shirt. My personal favorite was the mug on the mug, the lady's shirt, or the bag. So in 1 week, we were able to launch this website. It was live, and people could actually purchase one of these items in 1 week. That's what we call a minimum viable product. Now, I'm curious, has anyone here ever seen Shark Tank before? TV show Shark Tank? You got the entrepreneurs pitching venture capitalists and investors on funding their project. So I love that show. Now, I deep down have a secret plan of taking this idea onto Shark Tank, but having watched it enough, I know we have to get some distribution in some maybe local coffee shops or prove that there's some demand before we move forward. So I'm curious, if that's what we were able to do was this in 1 week, one iteration, what do you think we could do in the second iteration? So comment in the chat, what do you think would be the next steps for further promoting the Writing on Coffee website? What could be new features that we add, something creative? How could we get this idea out to market so that it would be viable enough that we could go on Shark Tank, get a wonderful investment, retire early, and live happily ever after? All right, so reaching out to collaborators, customized poems. Okay, so maybe we could have people submit their own poems to have printed. All right, we could have a brand ambassador. I like that. Maybe get some influencers on Instagram. All right, any other ideas? If you've already said an idea, you can say it more than once, so feel free to chime in more than once. What if we had like local artists where we had them draw or take a painting and print that on the cup as well? Starbucks partnership, I like that. Yeah. So you know how they have special cups for the holidays, like Valentine's Day or Christmas or holidays, or maybe like breast cancer awareness, like a charity. What if we had like a theme of like positive messages that you put out in the world that actually printed on the cups themselves? So instead of the photo of the coffee cup, what if we actually printed it on the cups that you could either have as disposable, or you could take like the larger mugs that are like it's printed on that. That might be kind of cool. Any other thoughts, comments in the chat? What else could we do? What if we had, we could have just either positive messages that we put out in the world, people could customize the poems, we could add artists. What if we just spread positive messages? What if we had motivational quotes? There's so much that we could go. We could look at like the Hallmarks type of stores. We could look at selling them online. We could even run a marketing campaign. So I love a lot of the comments that we have here in the chat. I definitely think like brand ambassadors and influencers, definitely a way to go. And it could really be personalized as a gift. So this is the concept of Agile at its most simplest form. What's a minimal increment that you can deliver to market and then building upon it? Now, I'm curious, what do you think was the profit margin on this? So comments in the chat. Do you think we had a high profit margin or a low profit margin? What do you think was our profit margin when we launched this website? Give just a moment for everyone to type in the chat. I see some comments rolling in. Okay, hi. All right, I think we got a pretty good profit margin going. Running lean and mean, getting up and running in a week. All right, over 50%. All right, I'm seeing all high votes. Actually, it was a horrible profit margin. It was very low. Now, why is that? Well, the reason is we were using a third-party print-on-demand service for being able to have these items shipped to people one at a time on demand. And because of that, we found this platform that would integrate with the website, and it was the simplest thing that could possibly work. That's a concept in Agile. What is the simplest thing that could possibly work? Do that and then iterate upon it. So because we use this site where we were printing one item on demand at a time, what we found was it was very expensive. So like a t-shirt was like $37 was our cost. So we didn't really want to mark it up too much more. We didn't want to put it over $40. So we like marked it up to $39. So only making a couple bucks, but hey, now we can at least vet, will anybody want this product? Is this even something that is worth pursuing further than the initial investment of time building the website and getting it up and running? So that's the idea in Agile. It's, okay, what can we do? And let's just get that minimal increment out, and then we're going to build upon it. So my goal was just to have something out there that we could see if it was a good idea. And then in a future iteration, we can look at optimizing for profitability. So either we could find a different printing service, or we could go with the affiliate model and work with maybe even local coffee shops before we go approaching Starbucks. They might have more authority to make the decision sooner. And then from there, we can look at maybe we can print or ship in bulk, and we can save on our costs a little bit more. But you see, the goal of the first sprint was not to have the best profit margin. The goal was just to see if anybody would even want this stuff. And if we were wrong, we only lost a week. So when we look at an Agile approach, it's this iterative approach. It's a different way of working than many people are used to thinking. Now, a lot of Fortune 100 companies are starting to use Agile now more than ever before. Although it takes a lot to steer such a large ship that has been working in a certain way for so long. I mean, picture like when they were trying to steer the Titanic, like that was a big thing to do. So when you've got a company with decades, sometimes centuries of processes and historical ways of working, it can be a little bit challenging when you first go to introduce this concept of Agile. So let's talk about some attributes of Agile. It's a more collaborative approach. We want more cross-functional teams. So instead of having an approach where you have each person, here's my role and skill set, and this is what I'm working on, now I'm going to pass it to you. We just did the development, now you do the testing. We want to think more like a startup company or like a really collaborative team that cares about the shared goal or shared outcome. So it's a different way of working. You know, we talk about this concept of Agile leadership. Like, how do we encourage people to be more collaborative? Well, we want to encourage self-organization among the team. If we can set a clear vision, it's more like, you know, with the ScrumMaster role, when you're using the Scrum Framework, the ScrumMaster role is really focused on helping to empower the teams, helping to make sure that everybody has what they need, and following up on removing roadblocks. So when you think about that, the analogy often used is like a sheepdog. If a sheepdog is helping to herd sheep, they're running out around the outer edges of where the sheep are to kind of guide them in the different directions. When that's more of like an Agile leadership approach. When you look at traditional project management, that's more like a dog sled. You got the person that's like mush, mush, and all the dogs are like chained up running forward. And so when we think about it, it's more of a servant leadership style. It's helping create the environment where the team can be successful and helping them be creative in how they create the output. We also want to deliver incrementally and iteratively provide value. So if we can look at what's a minimal increment that we can release now, we can actually get real world feedback and then build upon it from there. And third, we want to inspect and adapt or continuously improve. If we can look at what we've done and make it incrementally better, micro improvements over time can actually be some of the greatest improvements overall. And so Agile is more of a mindset. It's more of something that you are or are not. It's not just something that you do. You don't just install the Agile and then you just follow the framework. It's a way of being, it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of looking at the work differently. So I want to talk about the Agile Manifesto here. This is really what founded the entire Agile movement. And there were 17 software developers that came together back in 2001. And they said that they were uncovering better ways of developing software and helping others do it as well. So they came together at Snowbird Ski Resort in Salt Lake City, Utah. And these guys, they were saying there's got to be a better way to work. You had people from the Scrum world, from the extreme programming world, from the lean world. And what was happening back in 2001 is you had these huge software development projects, and they would span multiple years. They'd have millions of dollars sunk cost and zero working functionality to show for it. And the challenge was that they were so complex, these projects, that time would just drag on, budget would be flushed away, and nothing actually worked because it was all one big release at the end of the project. So it was like a real big hope that we could get the value. Now, fast forward to where we're at, 2021, companies really can't afford to wait that long. So with these 4 values, this is really at the core of the Agile leadership mindset. So we want to focus on individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We want to focus on people over process. Can we interact with people? Can we connect with them? Can we collaborate rather than only following the process and steps of what we've always done? When we look at working software, or Agile is being used outside of software these days, some people substitute that with a working product or working value over comprehensive documentation. So can we actually get an increment working? Can we get the website up and just see if anyone would order a product off of it, rather than writing and documenting out exactly what the website's going to look like and getting everything spec'd out to the nth degree before we even start building? Can we collaborate with our customers instead of only focusing on the contracts and negotiating that? Now, this is not to say you don't have contracts. We still have contracts, but can we focus on what's in the best interest of the customer? Can we be responsive? Can we be adaptive? Can we listen to them? And can we respond to change over following a plan? So notice the statement at the bottom. Well, there's value in the items on the right. We're just saying we value the items on the left more. So it's not to say, it's not to say that we don't document. It's not to say that we don't plan. It's not to say that we have no process. We're just saying that we want to do what makes sense instead. So when you look at why companies move toward Agile, here's some of the main reasons. We look at the visibility. In a traditional project management approach, we're going to get all the requirements up front, going into design, development, testing. And it's not till the very end when we go into implementation that we can even show our stakeholders what we've created. So it's like, ta-da, at the very end, and we really hope we have the right product. With an Agile approach, we have much more visibility because every couple weeks, every single iteration, we can actually show our stakeholders what we've done. So we're breaking the work into smaller pieces, into smaller increments, and we're focusing on what we can release now to then build upon. With adaptability, in the traditional approach, we're kind of on this one-way train track, and it's, again, we're delivering at the end. With Agile, we actually build into the process the opportunity to shift or adjust how we're working. With business value, we don't release any value till the very end of the project in one big release in a traditional approach. But with Agile, we could actually release a little bit over time. And so might not be every single sprint, but it could be very frequently throughout the project. And then with risk, traditionally, we're holding on to a lot of the risk until we've tested. We have to make sure that it works. And if it's not tested, doesn't work, we're holding on to a lot of risk. And it's not till more like 70% through the project that we really get into the testing phase usually. So with Agile, we're actually reducing the risk as we go because we're building these minimal increments that could be potentially shippable, and we're able to build upon it from there. So I want to talk for a moment about the satire change model and how people often respond to change. Has anyone worked in an environment where things started to change and you notice there's some resistance and people don't want to change? All right, I see 2 hands up over there. Awesome. Yeah, see some other hands going up. That's normal. People typically, change is easy when you want to do it. But if change is being inflicted upon you, this is where a lot of times people have resistance because there's unknowns. It can be scary. People can feel uncertain on what this means for them. Now let's talk for a minute. Why do companies want to move toward Agile? What's the reason? Well, typically they want to reach this state of higher performance, this new status quo. But how are we going to get to this new status quo? How are we going to just go from where we're at now to where we want to be? You don't just go bloop and just like jump up to this higher productivity. Usually something has to happen. There has to be some kind of foreign element that comes into play for you to do anything different from what you've always done. So once there's a change, like let's say, for example, you're working with a company that wants to move toward Agile. And they say, okay, we want this higher performance from our teams. We want to get to market faster and work more efficiently. There has to be something that changes how you work every day in order to do something different to get different results. Now, unfortunately, typically when there's this change, there can be some uncertainty. And we might have this calibration phase that feels very chaotic. Things start to go well, then not so well, and back and forth. And it's not until you have a transforming idea of how the change is going to work for you that typically people will actually embrace the new change. So this is something, we call this the satire change model. This is something that a lot of organizations face over and over again in how people respond to change. Now, another example of this, I had a friend who I saw on social media. He just started working out all the time and he was just eating healthy and going to the gym and he looked amazing. He looked super healthy. I was so impressed. And one day I commented on his post and I was like, man, congrats. Like you're looking great. And he's like, oh yeah. And I said, where did you find this motivation to work out so much and like suddenly eat so healthy? He was doing a Mediterranean diet. He's like sharing his recipes online. I was like, this is super inspirational. And he's like, oh, yeah. So I went to the doctor and they said I have a heart disease and I could die if I don't make a change. It's like, oh, got it. So that was the foreign element that caused him to change his status quo to get to the state of higher performance, to get in the shape he's always wanted to get in. But it wasn't that easy because he started changing his habits and then he noticed that he missed all the junk food he'd been eating. He started realizing it was difficult going out with friends and not being able to order the same food. And it was a little bit of up and down. So the purpose of sharing with you the satire change model is to just make you aware that this is often what people go through when you're looking at something new and when things do change and they're different from before. So we want to be aware that it's not necessarily just going to be a walk in the park. We want to be aware that there might be a little bit of uncertainty or chaos as we start to work in a different way. Now, you can't necessarily get rid of all the chaos, but what you can do is shorten your time in chaos. And you can do this in a couple of ways. One, as leaders, we can share the vision of what the change is, why it's happening, invite people to provide input and ideas. One other thing you could do is invite someone that's already been through that change before. A lot of companies are bringing in Agile coaches to help them with their transition to moving toward Agile because they're seeing that they're struggling and stepping in a bunch of like potholes as they're trying to like navigate across their transition. And so if you can work with a coach or someone experienced, that can help you reduce the time in chaos because, well, they've seen this before and they can guide you through it more effectively. And really it's just looking for the opportunity. Once we find the benefit, a lot of teams, they don't want to work in an Agile way. It's very collaborative and they might feel like it's a little micromanagey. But in reality, when we worked in an office, we would have people sitting co-located. People resisted that so much. But in reality, people would find that, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Wow, it's a lot easier to get answers to my questions when my teammates are sitting right across the way here. And so then they start to see, okay, there's actually is a benefit to working in this different way. So, when you think about what can we do to be effective in using an Agile approach, well, we can help make sure that people feel heard, feel understood, make sure there's a feedback loop where we're listening to what the perception is of people that are moving toward this new way of working. And that can help ease that process through that transition. So I want to talk for a moment about the concepts of incremental and iterative. And I'm curious, what do you think is better? Comments in the chat, iterative or incremental? Which approach do you think is a better approach? Give just a moment for everyone to comment in the chat. All right, I see some answers rolling in. Iterative's pretty popular. Trick question. What? Anyone for incremental? All right, I want to hear from someone with iterative. Why do you think that that's the best approach? What do you like about the iterative approach? Yeah, go ahead.
Just because it gives you as many opportunities to test and react and change what is necessary to change.
Okay, so we have an idea of the bigger picture. We can fill in more details over time, and we still have flexibility. Okay. Now, I didn't see anyone comment incremental, but could anyone speak to, is there anything good about the incremental approach? Do you like anything about it? Yeah.
Tika?
Yes, I mean, I would say maybe in the incremental approach, there is less of risk involved. Like if you look at it from a different perspective, because obviously you're starting with one brick at a time. So maybe in that aspect.
Okay, so we can actually have an increment of the final product, and we can see, is this something that our customers like? Is it something they want? We can actually get real feedback from that increment. Yeah, less risk, one step at a time. Yeah, so really when we look at this, it's a little bit of looking at how can we have an idea of the bigger picture, a lightweight overarching view, and then have a really strong idea of what an increment looks like. So we're actually building as we go. So really with an agile approach, we want to do a little bit of both. So when we look at that larger picture, the iterative approach, this is where, think of this as like a release plan. We're going to give a high level idea of what features or functionality we're going to deliver on a project as we go. But we're going to incrementally release something, and each time, each iteration, we're going to have a little bit better idea of what the end product is going to look like. So we're going to have a better idea of our release plan, a better idea of what the overall big picture is. We're going to fill in more of those blanks, but we're still going to have an increment that we could potentially ship sooner. So even the second iteration here, we could probably cut off the canvas and just frame that right there if we needed to. That could be a suitable picture. We could even keep going after the third iteration. The Mona Lisa could be sitting on a bench in this park. Maybe she's riding a horse. Maybe we can change up her hands. She can be petting a cat, Dr. Evil style. Like, we have a lot of options here. So when we look at the incremental and iterative approach, it's a different way of thinking. It's a mindset shift. And that's what we want to be thinking when we look at an agile approach. So we've talked a bit about Agile. We've talked about how Scrum is one of the most commonly used Agile approaches. And I want to talk about the 3 pillars for a moment here. It's inspecting and adapting and transparency. So transparency is something that I don't see a lot of in organizations. I see a lot of environments where people want to CYA, make sure that they're safe from any backlash of any issues that arise. People don't want to report to management when they feel like they're behind schedule because they want to make sure that their job is secure. But when people don't talk about the problems that are going on, often we can't actually fix them. And then that's where projects become inefficient. We start missing deadlines and going over budget. So a big thing in Agile is inspecting and adapting, constantly looking at what's working, what's not working, what do we do different, and then making those changes. Now, if we're inspecting and adapting, if we don't have transparency, this can be a problem. Without transparency, we're not looking at reality. So what are we really inspecting and adapting on at all? So these 3 pillars are really important when we're using the Scrum framework so that we can be sure that we are able to iterate effectively and we're able to make changes all throughout the project that help us be more effective. So I want to talk for a moment about the concept of doing Agile versus being Agile. Because a lot of companies do just the doing. They just go through the motions. So when you just use an Agile approach, you can have a better ability to manage changing priorities, better visibility, productivity, better quality, and less risk. But if you're actually being Agile, this is where you can get more 3X benefits. And this is an excerpt from the Agile leadership class that we work with Michael Sahota on. He's an enterprise coach through the Scrum Alliance, and I really found this to be inspirational to think about. So when you look at the benefits on the left, the 20% benefits, and you look at the benefits on the right, I mean, it's just night and day. Like, what if we had customers that were delighted? What if we had people that actually came to work and had joy every day and loved what they did, fully engaged, an environment of innovation and creativity and continuous learning? Imagine what better quality products you could have. I'd like to invite comments in the chat. What are your thoughts on doing versus being agile? If you just go through the motions of the practices versus truly embracing the mindset. So comment in the chat any observations or thoughts that you have here. Have you ever worked in an environment that had the stuff on the right-hand side, where it was a creative environment, where people were excited to be there? You know, this really gets into the culture of an organization. When you're just going through the motions of a framework or methodology, yes, you can get some benefits, but it's so incredible to see what's possible when you truly embrace the agile concept and really embody it. Yeah, doing is what ends up happening in many places that brag about agile. That's it. Yep. The mindset, you can go so much further when people truly get it, when they really understand and embody that. So a traditional approach of project management, we start with getting all the requirements up front, go into the design phase, then development, testing, and implementation. Now, typically, this is called waterfall because you have to finish one phase before you go to the next. So it's like kind of symbolizes the waterfall, water flowing downstream. Now, if we're launching a website, we have to get everything done fully before we can launch to market. Now, with an agile approach, we're still going to go through these phases, but we're only going to do it for an increment of the work. So for example, if we're launching that website, what if we just went through the requirements, design, development, testing, and implementation for just the homepage? I've worked with companies where it's taken on average like 5 or 6 months to launch a website to market. Now, can a business survive without an online presence these days? Like, are they even real? I used to meet people at conferences, and if they're not on LinkedIn, I'm like, did I even meet them? Like, do they exist? And so companies need a presence, and waiting half a year is just not okay. So in 2 weeks, can we get a minimum viable product out there? Can we launch the website, and can we have that be there? Can we then go back and iterate through creating the services page? Go back and then build the backend database, but we don't need to wait until we have the backend database to release the homepage, right? So this is the agile concept. This is the agile way of working. And a lot of companies are actually pretty agile in how they work in development these days. But then what we're seeing is that companies go into traditional marketing cycles. So what we really want is full business agility throughout the organization, where it can be agile in how we develop a product to market and how we actually do the marketing. So it's an iterative and incremental approach in how we think and how we work and in how we collaborate within our teams and throughout our organization. In fact, the heart of Agile was put together by Alistair Coburn about 5 or 6 years ago. He's one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto. And what was happening is all these companies were starting to use these complex frameworks for scaling. But the problem is that they weren't even using Agile properly in the first place. And so they're trying to scale like bad practices. And so what Alistair said is, if we can simply do 4 verbs, can we collaborate more effectively? Can we deliver something small and soon? Can we reflect on what's working or not working? Check data, check emotions, and then can we focus on making an incremental improvement? And at the heart of what we're trying to do here with Agile, it really is this simple: collaborate to deliver, and then reflect and improve. So as we start to think about the way that we work, it's just these shorter incremental cycles. It's looking at what we're doing and making any adjustments or changes as we can. It's focusing on having the minimum viable product, or MVP. If you can get a minimum viable product out the door, then we can build upon that and we can enhance with additional features later. You know, even the first iPhone did not have the copy paste feature. How often do we use copy paste on our phones today? I copy messages and paste them all the time. But they decided, no, we're going to go to market and we're going to be one of the first to market with this fancy smartphone. And they added the copy paste feature later. And guess what? That was okay. So this is where we get to the mindset of what's the minimum viable. And you might want to even go past minimum viable. And I had a group once I was working with Indianapolis. They're like, Maria, but what about the MLP? I'm like, what's the MLP? I don't know that I've heard that before. They're like, what about a minimum lovable product? So as we look at when we release this product to market, is it viable? Can they use it? But are they going to love it? Or are they going to come back? So we want to have that balance between, we don't want to release a product too soon, and we don't want to wait too long. So there's some place in the middle that we could start to incrementally release. So I want to play a video here. It's an excerpt from a TED Talk by Joe Justice. And Joe has broken 4 world records using Scrum to build cars. And when I first saw him talking about this, it was back in 2012. He was speaking as a keynote presenter at a conference in Texas. I think it was Dallas or Houston. And he literally blew my mind. Like, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is incredible. They had a wiki speed car up on the stage, and he was talking through how they can build a car that gets 100 miles per gallon. They have the lightest chassis in the world to reach a 5-star crash rating equivalency. And they've just literally been defying the odds of what auto manufacturers think they have to do for so many years. So I want to play this brief video, and then I want to open up the floor for some discussion, and put any comments in the chat as you hear or think of anything.
I'm Joe Justice. I'm a Seattle area software consultant, and I'm a member of Team Wikispeed. Team Wikispeed has built a fast, affordable, ultra-efficient, safe, fun commuter car. And the first functional prototype was built in 3 months. Existing manufacturing processes are slow because they're very expensive to change. If an engineer wanted to redesign this door tomorrow, they would need to wait 10 years to first pay off the current door mold before making another one, or else lose millions of dollars. This is not uncommon in manufacturing teams for them to run on 10 to 25-year development cycles. Old software teams used to run the same way. We use 7-day development cycles. This is how new software teams run, and it allows us to make changes very quickly. In 2008, the Progressive Insurance Automotive X Prize announced a $10 million prize purse and an international challenge to see if it were even possible to build 100-mile-per-gallon cars to road legal safety specifications. The closest thing we had in 2008 were like bobsleds. They achieved more than 100 miles per gallon, but they held 1 occupant, and they didn't meet road legal safety requirements. I joined the X Prize too, but in the beginning it was just me. But I decided to blog about everything that went well and everything that didn't go well and everything I was learning. And through social networking tools, a team came to assist. And 3 months later, we had the car that we campaigned in the X Prize and a volunteer team of 44 team members in 4 countries. We tied for 10th in the mainstream class. That meant we outlasted more than 100 other cars from companies and universities around the world. We do this by modeling our team to develop the car after modern software teams. We use techniques with funny-sounding names like Agile, Lean, and Scrum. These methods all help us make changes quickly. Right after the X Prize, we were invited to the largest auto show in the world, January 2011 in Detroit, Michigan. We knew we wanted a more beautiful car, a more aesthetic car, but we also knew that for 1 car body, it would cost us at least $36,000 and 3 months lead time. So I took time off my day job, and I went to composite school. I came back to the team, and we made small models of the car and iterated a composites process that ended up letting us build our car body in structural carbon fiber in 3 days for $800. They put us on the main floor of the auto show between Ford and Chevrolet. Lucky for us, the car was beautiful. Now, and this has been a 6-month time span, most of what I'm talking about. Now, Rob Moorbacher, who leads our Germantown, Maryland team, is producing our production convertible city car mold. So how do we do it? We're modular. The engine is able to be switched from a gasoline to electric engine in about the time it takes to change a tire. The car body switches from a convertible to a pickup truck. This lets us make changes and develop quickly. Here you can see our chassis, our frame, holds all the modules together. That chassis is the lightest chassis in the world to achieve a 5-star crash rating equivalency. We're safe because we design safety tests for our parts before we even build them. In fact, we design tests for all of our parts before we build them. We take this from test-driven development in the software world. We use less stuff wherever we can. Here, Rob Huggins, a Seattle area recent high school graduate, is saving up for college, and he's able to build a WikiSpeed car by using an $89 bandsaw and a home-built CNC router instead of a piece of equipment that costs more than $100 million in existing automotive process. We reduce the cost to make change wherever possible, costs in tooling, machinery, and complexity. This lets us not have to wait 3 to 7 years for the next version of our product. Again, we're able to make changes to any part of the car every 7 days. We use distributed collaborative teams. These, again, increase our velocity. And we found that morale is a multiplier for velocity across the team. And the way we organize our teams is the smallest, fastest way to organize an Agile team. It's called Scrum. Scrum is a method to manage a team in a very rapid way, and that's exactly how we manage our teams in Team WikiSpeed. We do all our work in pairs. This avoids time spent training that's not productive. It also eliminates the need for most types of documentation. Here, Martin Val and Kurt Roy are building one of our engines. They actually both perfectly know how to do it, but they're able to share all that knowledge while working without then having to up-train someone afterwards. We visualize our workflow to identify any time spent not creatively solving problems.
All right, what do you think? Comments in the chat or feel free to speak verbally. How cool is that? Amazing, right? Yeah. The first time I heard it, I was like, who is this legend? Joe Justice, with a name like that, he would break world records, wouldn't he? Yeah, it just blew my mind because, you know, Agile's often used or associated with software development. And it's so much more simple when you want to apply it than you might think. Like, it's not this super complex thing. It's actually, you know, we talked about with the writing on coffee, and we talked about, you know, even applying it to something that seems complex like manufacturing. It's actually very possible. And the Scrum framework is the most commonly used approach, and it really does get results. I had a privilege of visiting the WikiSpeed microfactory that Joe has in Seattle a couple of years ago. And he was teaching a Scrum and hardware train the trainer class. And I was really excited for the time when we went to go build the cars with Scrum. And we were all kind of waiting for, like, what's the secret recipe for how he uses Scrum to build cars? And what we came to the conclusion of is there is no secret recipe. Like, Scrum just works, and it works whether you apply it in development, apply it in marketing, apply it in manufacturing, whatever the context, it's really, really effective. Any other comments? See a comment in the chat, very impressive, and I would definitely agree. So let's actually explore the Scrum framework a little bit on what is the Scrum framework and how does it work. So we talked about the Agile concept, the Agile mindset, and, you know, we're talking about like an Agile leadership approach. Like, it is one of the most effective ways to lead or manage any team because it helps us focus on the highest value and getting that out and released to market. So Scrum is this empirical approach that's ideal for solving any complex problems. It helps us to take the work and break it down to be more manageable. And so we always start with what's called the product backlog. This is a prioritized list of everything that we need to do. So just like what Joe had in the wall of their microfactory, they had all the Post-it notes. Here's all the things that we need to work on. It also helps us to visualize the work. Then the team will work on what we call the sprint backlog. They'll plan, what can we do in the next time box? So let's say it's a 2-week sprint. We're going to work in 2 weeks. Every time we're going to plan the work we do in 2 weeks. That's all the team is focusing on. So it's a laser focus on getting that minimal increment released to market. Then we have the sprint length, with the duration is anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks long. And so the reason we don't want to go longer than 4 weeks is because then we start to find ourselves doing mini waterfall, and all the testing falls to the very end. But we want to keep this a very short cycle, because every day we're going to have what's called the daily scrum, and the team members are going to connect and say, what have I done? here's what I'm doing next, and here's anything in my way. And then the Scrum Master has the opportunity to follow up on any roadblocks as soon as they're mentioned. And the whole goal is to have this potentially shippable product increment. So a potentially shippable product increment is actually the output for the project. So it's like our Writing on Coffee website. You can go to writingoncoffee.com. You can actually pick, mix, and match a poem and print it on an item that will be shipped to your house. For Joe, they had a potentially drivable car. They used to literally take the frame, the wheels, the pedals, the steering wheel, the gas tank, the engine, put it all together. They didn't even need a car body on it. They'd go drive it around a racetrack. It's the coolest thing ever. So it's the minimal increment that we can see. Is this the right type of product that we want to make? And is this what our customers want? And at its most basic form, this is the Scrum framework. This is the flow that we want to work. So the difference between a traditional project management approach is we're playing out every single task. We're saying, here's everything we're going to do, and we're trying to predict the whole year. What's different is that here with the Scrum approach, we have a prioritized product backlog, and things might change. We might change the priority. We might add new things, remove some things that are out of scope. But the team is pulling in just increments of work to work on to have something that's minimally viable. And it is so incredibly effective for a way of working. So for the Scrum framework, there's 3 roles, there's 5 events, and 3 artifacts. So each of these roles help provide a check and balance for each other. The Scrum Master is guiding the team through using the Scrum framework. The product owner is setting the priority and is the single point of contact with stakeholders. That should allow the team to focus on the work, because the Scrum Master is also diligently following up on any impediment or anything in the team's way. Now, the sprint is the time box that the team's going to work in. That's very unique to Scrum. And over time, we can start to get very predictable of what we can release when, because we start to get into a rhythm. So sprint planning is the act of determining what work we're going to do, pulling it from the product backlog, the highest priorities, into just this time frame. The daily Scrum is that touch point every single day so that the team is escalating any roadblocks or challenges they have. The Scrum Master can hear every single day what's in the team's way and focus on following up on that. Also, the team stays connected and they know what each other are doing, this collaborative approach. At the end of the sprint, we have our sprint review, where we show the stakeholders what we've done, and a sprint retrospective where the team talks about how to improve and be more effective. So all the work is listed in this product backlog. It's a prioritized list. What the team's going to work on right now, we call the sprint backlog. And so now we've got blinders. We only have to focus on getting this increment done. All we're focusing on is that minimum viable product for that website, so people can buy a poem on a coffee cup printed on something. Like, that's it, just one increment at a time. And so the product increment, it's just helping make sure everything's fully developed and tested, and then we could potentially release if desired. So when we talk about the Scrum framework, this is it. These are the core elements, the 3 roles, the 5 events, and the 3 artifacts. And all of these things are carefully put together to help a team be as efficient as possible. So I want to share a little bit about the value of the Certified Scrum Master designation. I know a couple people here have already gone through the training classes that we lead here virtually. And the CSM is one of the highest paying certifications in the world when it comes to Scrum. It's one of the highest paying certifications of the last 5 years. Average salary is over 6 figures. And the reason that it's so valued is because people get results using this approach. You can probably see from the things we talked about tonight that the mindset, having the Agile mindset, using a proven system, a proven framework is essential. So there's 3 roles in Scrum: Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Team. Scrum is still highly used in software development. So we have Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, Certified Scrum Developer. Scrum Alliance also has the Certified Agile Leadership Program. Scrum Alliance is in about 180 countries, and there's about 1 million certified Scrum Masters worldwide. So when companies are hiring project managers at a company that's using Agile, they will often look to hire a Scrum Master, and they'll say CSM is preferred or required. So it is very, very valuable to have that certification under your belt. I've been actually exploring the concept of Agile outside of IT over the last several years. So Agile applied to marketing, Agile applied to your life. We call that personal agility. And it's really incredible to see how these approaches really apply in any domain. So there's no prerequisite necessary to take the Certified Scrum Master class. It's one of the most highly valued certifications. It's a 2-day class. There's a brief exam at the end, and would love to invite you, if anyone here is interested, would like to learn more about Scrum or the Scrum Master class, would be happy to provide more details. And we also have a special discount available for anybody that is here as part of your club. Yes, that was US dollars. Gotcha. Fair enough. Are there any questions?
Left everyone speechless, Maria.
So speechless. I always love a good speechless crowd.
That was
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that was an excellent, webinar. Thank you very much. Please, if there's anything else you'd like to say, there's a question in the chat from Ritika, actually.
How long is it? The class? It's
Yes.
2 days. So it's just like 8 hours, 2 days in a row. We do a break every hour and then an hour break for lunch. So it's a fairly interactive class. We do breakout sessions. We do a project simulation, planning a Scrum project from the ground up so that you'll have experience doing it once, and then you can start to apply it to other projects. So I'm just going to put a link into the chat of some of our upcoming class dates, and David and Alan have a discount code that will get you a special discount if you wanted to join any of our classes for being part of the group here. Do you have an idea of around how much percentage companies worldwide have Scrum implemented? That could be in the State of Agile survey. Version 1 is Agile Software Tool Company does the State of Agile survey every year. And they have a lot of really powerful insights that they've gathered. That's where I was talking about the 56% of companies that use Agile use the Scrum Framework. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. There's a lot more information that I don't know those stats off the top of my head, but they really do a great job of breaking that down for any questions there. Any other questions? Well, as we wrap up for today, would just like to invite everyone to comment in the chat. I would love to hear your thoughts or your feedback. What's your biggest insight from what we talked about today? Oh, DJ said after the workshop, that is always possible. Did you pick that up? How'd you know I was a DJ? Just got custom turntables made. Actually, some of our classes, we do project simulations, and there may or may not be Agile wrapping and sometimes live DJ sets in our training. So, come get certified. We'll have a good time and enhance your skill set. And I guess it's a certification training party. That's what we should do. Training parties. That's it. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.